hand-loaded FBI load. And what the old school FBI load used to be was a 158 grain lead semi-wad cutter, 38 Special plus P loaded, very, very warm. So I've made my own today with some Alliant powder, pistol powder. I'm using some Winchester small pistol primers too. So these bullets are Zero bullets. That's the brand, Zero brand bullets, 158 grain lead semi-wad cutter hollow point. And these were sent over to the channel by one of my Patreon supporters, Hillbilly Scholar. So thank you for sending those. And I wanted to see if I can try to recreate the old FBI load, which is, it's a 158 grain lead semi-wad cutter hollow point like these are, moving, I want to say over 900 feet per second is the actual velocity that those were loaded at. So my main test here is I'm going to test my hand loads through a 4-inch barrel, my 4-inch barrel Smith & Wesson 686, and my 2-inch barrel Taurus 605 to see how they do. I am bringing out the 3-inch barrel Taurus 856. I'm going to run these through the chronograph through this. I don't plan to use this in the ballistic gel test unless the 2-inch barrel fails to get hollow point expansion or something like that. So I'm hopeful that these will expand out of a 2-inch barrel, and hopeful they'll get really big expansion out of a 4-inch barrel, but I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to get. So what I used for my load was 6 grains of power pistol, which is actually the max charge for this particular load data. And they're 38 special, so I'm not really worried about simply going to the max. You're not going to be able to see any pressure signs with that anyway, so I don't think it's going to be a problem with 38 special going to the max. So 6 grains of power pistol, that is listed by Alliant at having 1,037 feet per second through a 6-inch barrel. So my max barrel length here is a 4-inch barrel, so we probably won't get 1,037, but we'll probably get close. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. So I'm going to go into plain clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. And no denim in the way to clog a hollow point or anything like that. That'll give us our best potential for hollow point expansion. Then I'll move on to do more of a real world simulation where I'm going to have 4 layers of denim on this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, we'll have a 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics to represent more flesh, and then another 1/4-inch medium density fiberboard at the back to represent back ribs. You might be saying, well, 3 inches and 16 inches, that's thicker than a normal attacker would be. Well, clear ballistics is a half representation of the density of flesh, and also skin. It takes a couple inches to represent skin of clear ballistics. So this is really like 1.5 inches of pectoral muscle and flesh and skin, and about 8 inches in an actual living target. So we're really trying to simulate a 9.5-inch target with ribs in there. So we'll do a plain clear ballistics shot, our best potential, then a real world simulation with our denim and our rib simulation, and then I am going to shoot the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, so we're going to start with our 4-inch barrel. I have a number on the screen of 799 feet per second, and that's just from a test round I ran of this 38 Special MagTech 158 grain semi-jacket at hollow point. That's what a typical 38 Special 158 grain will give, about 800 feet per second. So let's see how I get with my 158 grain. That's my wad cutter hollow point, 6 grains of power pistol powder, 4-inch barrel. .927. .994. 974. 980. 1005. 993. All right, so first shot was kind of low, but the rest of them got up there pretty close to 1,000 feet per second. Now I'm going to try it through the 3-inch barrel. See how this does. This gun is shooting all over the place. 975. 972. 963. 965. All right, so pretty consistent with that, and almost the same velocity. Interestingly enough, You know, a 3-inch barrel is what the FBI did use way back in the day as their standard issued revolver. I think it was a model 13, a Smith & Wesson 13, which was like a small medium frame 357 Magnum with the 3-inch barrel. It's a 2-inch barrel. Let's see what this will do. 908, 900, 889, 909, 934. So not a huge difference in velocity. I'm liking what I'm seeing. So, you know, with the 3-inch and the 4-inch barrel, there's not a big difference there. But with this, we do drop that velocity by probably 75 feet per second. So not bad overall for its power. So let's hit our Ballistic's gel block. Let's see how the 2-inch barrel compares to the 4-inch barrel with this ammo. All right, our best potential shot in the plain clear Ballistics. No denim in the way to clog a hollow point. No rib simulation to slow down its potential for penetration. So let's see what we get with our 4-inch barrel. These 0 bullets. All right, let me hit that with the 2-inch barrel. Let's go take a look. Yeah, I kind of felt like this was going to happen. When I saw that extreme penetration there with the 4-inch barrel and not a whole lot of mushrooming there, I thought for sure, you know, that 2-inch barrel is going to go kind of far, and it did, and it kind of started to come off the block at the back there. So I don't think it's expanded very much. No expansion really, other than a little bit of nose flaring there. So what we got going on with the 4-inch barrel is about 18.5 inches, and with the 2-inch barrel we got 28 3/4. So this does warrant a shot with the 3-inch barrel. So let me hit it with the 3-inch barrel. All right, 3-inch barrel. I'm going to try to go right between those two if I can. See what this does. Go take a look. All right, so no expansion there, but we got a little bit less penetration than through the 4-inch barrel. So we got about 24 3/4. So not impressed with these bullets so far. Let me put on our denim, put in our rib simulation, and see how these compare in our real world simulation. All right, our real world simulation: 4 layers of denim, followed by 3 inches of clear ballistics to represent hitting a pectoral muscle and skin, followed by a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum, 16 more inches of clear ballistics, and then another 1/4 inch MDF to represent hitting back ribs. So let's see how our 4-inch barrel does through our real world simulation. All right. Now I'm going to move right along to hitting that with our 3-inch barrel, because we saw that we had a little bit of trouble with our 2-inch barrel. So 3-inch barrel. All right. Now try to hit this up here with our 2-inch barrel. Let's see how this compares. Go take a look. All right, so we barely caught that one through the 2-inch barrel, but we can see we got some pretty good results going on where we can really see what's going on here a little bit better with each of these shots here. So there's our first rib simulation. We can see with our 4-inch barrel we have some moderate expansion going on before it hits this. With our 3-inch barrel, that's diminished, and with our 2-inch barrel, there's basically none. So we can tell that, you know, going from maybe 1,000 or upper 900s to maybe 960, 975, it still has some good performance, but then when we drop it down to just over 900, we have some pretty bad performance. So only one of these went through that back rib simulation. So our 4-inch barrel, we stopped at a rib simulation, so we stopped at 19 inches. And we have some pretty good mushrooming there. Looking at the 3-inch barrel, there's a little bit less mushrooming or expansion. And we again stopped at 19 inches. And then we went through with our 2-inch barrel to about 21 3/4 inches of penetration. So we'll take a look at this back rib simulation here. And one thing we can see here is a good amount of a little mark there with the 4-inch barrel, and almost exactly the same with the 3-inch barrel. So it's likely these would have went to maybe 21, 22 inches without this back rib simulation in here, as well with our 2-inch barrel just punched right through that. So what that's going to tell you is there's enough mushrooming there with the 3-inch and the 4-inch barrel at those velocities with this bullet, that you're probably not going to pass through an attacker. So if you can keep it, I would say, above 950 feet per second, you're good to go with this bullet. But if you drop it down to below 950, this is what we're seeing a problem here with that. So while these velocities were pretty good for replicating the FBI load, this bullet isn't quite the best, because I think we should see a lot more mushrooming and expansion with a bullet like this. So I would say the lead's probably just a little bit too hard here. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them. Then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through plain gel. Our 2-inch barrel, our 3-inch barrel, and our 4-inch barrel. So it really is surprising that there is such a drastic change based on so little of a difference in velocity averages. So our 4-inch barrel going through plain gel, it looks like it had some really decent expansion. It didn't quite peel back, but it's not bad overall for what it is. Our 3-inch barrel, just dropping off a little bit of velocity, it still started to try to expand, but just quite couldn't. And then we look at our 2-inch barrel, and a little bit of deformation, but certainly no meaningful or actual expansion. Now going through our real world simulation, things changed up a little bit here. So we have our 4-inch barrel going through our real world simulation, our 3-inch barrel, and our 2-inch barrel. So our 4-inch barrel, out of all the ones through our real world simulation, definitely has the most meaningful expansion. That's not too bad overall for what it is. So slowed it down enough to not really over penetrate that much. A 3-inch barrel, not nearly as much expansion there compared to the 4-inch barrel. Well, it is pretty close, but just not quite as much. So we did have similar results with how far it penetrated. But then when we look at our 2-inch barrel going through our real world simulation, and we'll compare that to our 4-inch barrel here, yeah, there's enough less that it did over penetrate a good amount. So yeah, just very, very sensitive bullets as far as velocity goes and how they're going to expand. But because of how hard they are, these do look like they're going to need to be pushed at low magnum velocities to get some pretty good expansion. So you could take it for whatever it is. Some would say it's a bad thing, but some would say it's a good thing, because these are hand loading bullets and you can kind of do whatever you want with them. So I'm thinking probably 1100 feet per second, we're going to get kind of our desired expansion. So a nice light magnum, or you might call it a short barrel magnum. That's essentially what they are. Is they're just kind of like very lightly loaded magnums with heavier bullets. That's what a short barrel load is, because you have less powder to lose, and you lower that recoil at the same time, and then you increase that pressure by having a heavier bullet. So we can make some pretty good short barrel loads if I can push these at 1100 feet per second, or I could just have light magnums and push them out of a 4-inch barrel at that 1100, I think they would do pretty well. But as they stand as FBI type loads, I would say, you know, if we're looking at 4-inch barrel only, hitting about 1,000 feet per second, yeah, I'd say those are pretty good overall. But if you're going down to a shorter barrel, you're gonna need to change that up a little bit, either with a different bullet or by, you know, having a little bit more power behind these. So very interesting. So that's a close-up look at those bullets. All right, 14 yards from the target, so I am going to just get a front sight picture, pop these off as fast as I can, double action to where I could think I'll still hit the target. And I have to reiterate this so many times. People will be like, you shouldn't shoot single action, because I'm shooting it over the chronograph, and it's like, that's different than defensive handgun training, shooting a few rounds over a chronograph. If I have something that's gonna make that shot more precise for doing one shot, I'm gonna use it. You know, that doesn't mean that when I do this, I'm gonna be cocking the hammer every shot. I'm gonna do double action. But from what I saw though, at 5 yards, it seemed like out of this 4-inch barrel, that was pretty good accuracy. So I'll see what I can get with the 4-inch barrel here. 14 yards from the target, which is 42 feet. All right, very little recoil there. Very easy to control, but there is some muzzle jump. 3-inch barrel. I hate bringing that gun out. I very rarely bring it out because it just shoots so bad for me. I don't know what the deal is with that Taurus. I've sent it back. They just keep sending it back. Not working right. But 2-inch barrel. See if I can do it Alright, so this had the most muzzle jump and recoil felt. It wasn't that bad. It's certainly not like a 357 Magnum, but yeah, it's kind of like shooting maybe a 40 Smith & Wesson through a 4-inch barrel type of recoil. Where there's a little bit there, but it doesn't hurt at all. So look at these bullets and these hand loads I made here. Very easy to judge this. You know, these bullets seem okay at maybe 1,000 feet per second ish. You go down a little bit, they're still kind of okay, but at normal 38+P velocities, they did terrible. You know, I'm maxing out the charge and getting pretty good power. I mean, the power I'm getting, even through a 2-inch barrel, is a lot higher than typical. So the fact that we're not getting expansion is kind of bad. However, that being said, when we look at these bullets and the way they're designed and probably the hardness of the lead, they're going to be a pretty good light 357 Magnum bullet. So I may have to look at loading these as light 357 Magnums and see how they do that way. I think they would get some pretty good performance. But as it is, as 38 Special FBI load bullets, not particularly great. So very interesting. And again, thank you to Hillbilly Scholar for sending these bullets. And he sent some other bullets as well, some other semi-jacketed hollow point type bullets, and we'll have to test those at a later date also. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.